When I turned 29, I wasn't expecting a grand celebration. I've never really been the center of attention type. A slice of cake, some takeout, maybe a movie if I wasn't too tired after work. That's more my speed. But even with low expectations, I guess a part of me still hoped my family might show up with something that resembled thoughtfulness. Instead, they gave me a mug. A white, chipped dollar store mug with peeling red letters that read, "World's biggest disappointment." They all burst into laughter as I held it up, pretending to sip invisible tea like I was in on the joke. I remember my mom nudging my sister and whispering something like, "At least he finally has a title," before erupting into another fit of giggles. My dad raised his glass, root beer, I think, and toasted, "To Eric, may he someday figure it out." I smiled. I laughed. I played along. But deep down, something broke. My name's Eric. I'm 30 now. I work in software development. Nothing glamorous, but I do well. Better than well, honestly. I've been saving aggressively, investing smartly, and keeping my wins to myself. Growing up, I learned quickly that sharing good news in my family was like tossing raw meat into a pit of jealousy. My older brother, Kevin, would always find a way to one-up me, even if it meant lying. My younger sister, Bree, played the golden child role so well it deserved an Emmy. And my parents? Let's just say they saw me as potential that never quite bloomed. In their eyes, I was always almost something. Our family isn't close in the way that most people define it. We're more like four people who orbit the same obligations, held together by group texts, shared holidays, and a relentless commitment to appearances. My parents love projecting that we're tight-knit, successful, functional. But if you peeled back the curtain, just a little, you'd see a different picture. A dad who talks more about stock portfolios than feelings. A mom who ranks her kids' worth based on how many likes their Facebook posts get. A brother who borrowed thousands for business ventures that always ended in someone else's money disappearing. And a sister who managed to turn every family gathering into a slideshow of her life. Her job, her condo, her dog, her latest vacation with her fiancé, Trevor. I always played the part of the quiet one, the techie one, the one who never really fit in but means well. And every year, without fail, I showed up for birthdays, holidays, and Sunday dinners like clockwork, bringing gifts, staying late to help clean, nodding politely as they all talked over me. The mug, though, that was new. It wasn't just a thoughtless gift. It was an announcement, a declaration of how they saw me, how they'd always seen me, even if they used to hide it behind thin smiles and backhanded compliments. I remember turning it over in my hands, searching for a price tag that someone forgot to peel off. There wasn't one, which somehow made it worse. It meant someone went out of their way to find this thing, to buy it, wrap it, present it with a smirk. It wasn't a joke. It was a message. After dinner that night, I stayed behind to help Mom with the dishes like always. As I dried a plate, she turned to me and said, "Don't be so sensitive, Eric. It's just a little humor. You know we love you." I wanted to ask her how that counted as love, but I didn't. Instead, I smiled and said, "Of course." That's what I always did, kept the peace, smoothed things over, laughed when I was supposed to, nodded when it was expected. But on the drive home that night, something in me shifted. I looked over at the mug they'd shoved into a grocery bag, sitting on the passenger seat like a passenger itself. And for the first time, I didn't feel numb. I felt angry. Not the kind of anger that explodes in yelling or tears, but the quiet, deliberate kind. The kind that simmers. The kind that remembers. I didn't confront anyone. I didn't send a passive-aggressive group text. I didn't even unfollow them on social media. I just changed. Quietly. Slowly. I started saying no more. I stopped replying to every family message within minutes. I stopped rearranging my schedule for their convenience. And I definitely stopped sharing anything personal. When I bought my first investment property in cash later that year, I didn't tell a soul. When my app passed 100,000 users, I celebrated alone with a decent bottle of wine. I started living my life without needing them to notice. That was my gift to myself for my 30th birthday. Silence. No dinner. No group texts. No mug. I turned off my phone and flew to the coast, booked a tiny Airbnb by the ocean, and spent the day watching waves crash. I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't even sad. I was just done trying to prove anything to people who decided long ago who I was to them. But of course, peace doesn't last forever when you're part of a family like mine. 3 months after my birthday, the first message came in. A text from my dad. "Hey bud, Hope you're well. Wondering if we could chat sometime this week. I didn't respond. A day later, Kevin called twice in a row. Bree texted, "Are you mad at us or something? You've been MIA." I muted the thread. But then they showed up at my door. It was a Saturday. I was halfway through reorganizing my garage when I saw Bree's fiancé's car pull into the driveway. My parents stepped out, dressed like they were heading to brunch. Kevin trailed behind, sunglasses on, carrying some kind of binder. I didn't invite them in. I stood in the doorway with a towel over my shoulder and waited. "We just need a few minutes," Mom said quickly, like she was afraid I'd shut the door. "It's important." And it was. To them. Apparently, Kevin's newest business, some kind of eco-friendly lawn care subscription or whatever nonsense he was peddling, had tanked hard. Took a loan from Dad. Maxed out a couple cards. Bree had invested too. Now the family was on the hook for a chunk of debt, and the bank was starting to circle. They needed $20,000 to stay afloat. "Just a temporary loan," Kevin said, like he was talking about borrowing a sweater. "You're doing well, right? You don't even post much anymore. That usually means someone's doing great." I didn't answer right away. I let them talk. Let them pitch. Let them dig their hole with every guilt trip, every thinly veiled insult dressed as flattery. Then I walked to the kitchen and pulled something from the cabinet. The mug. The same chipped, ugly mug with its flaking red letters. I held it up and said, "Ask the mug." Their faces dropped. And that's when I shut the door. What happened after that? How they reacted, what they did next, was something I wasn't prepared for. Not fully. Because when entitled people feel cornered, they don't go quietly. They double down. They pull out every dirty trick, every manipulation, every guilt-laced memory they can weaponize. And my family. They were experts. I didn't hear from them for 3 days after I told them to ask the mug. It was almost peaceful, like the calm before a thunderstorm. Then the texts started trickling in. Bree was first. "That was really hurtful, Eric. You didn't have to be so dramatic. We just needed help, not sarcasm." Then Kevin, "If the roles were reversed, I wouldn't hesitate to help you, man. But I guess we're just different like that." Then Mom, "This isn't how we raised you." Each message was a different flavor of guilt, but they all said the same thing. "How dare you say no to us?" I didn't reply, not out of spite, but because I was done playing their game. I wasn't going to explain myself anymore. Not for being successful, not for protecting my boundaries, and certainly not for refusing to hand over $20,000 to fund yet another one of Kevin's flops. They didn't want my help. They wanted access. And I had closed the door. But instead of accepting it, they escalated. A week later, I found out Bree had been calling people, extended family, mutual friends, even some of my old coworkers, telling them I was going through something, that I'd become paranoid and isolated, and that I was being cruel to our parents. One of my cousins, Jenna, called me out of the blue and said, "Hey, is everything okay? Bree said you're in some kind of spiral." I laughed. Did she mention the mug? What mug? Exactly. Then came the family group chat. I hadn't left it. I just had it on mute. I usually scrolled through it every week or so just to make sure no one had died. But this time, they used it like a weapon. Kevin sent a long message, detailing how Eric has decided he's above us now, and how after everything we've done for him, he slammed the door in our faces. My dad chimed in next. "We're a family. We lift each other up. That's what we try to teach you." I guess that lesson didn't stick. Then came the kicker, from Bree. "It's just sad. I really thought Eric would come through when it mattered. But I guess the mug was more accurate than we thought." And they loved that line. Dad replied with a laughing emoji. Kevin followed with "fired." I didn't reply. Not then. I just stared at my phone for a while, feeling something crack inside me, not because I was hurt, but because I realized that for the first time in my life, I wasn't surprised. That group chat message wasn't the betrayal. That came later. It was early spring when I got the call. I remember because I was standing in the checkout line at Home Depot, buying paint for the guest room. I'd started fixing up my house. Nothing fancy, just small projects. It was therapeutic. Kept my hands busy while my mind processed things. My phone rang, and I didn't recognize the number, but something made me answer it anyway. "Hi, is this Eric Langley?" "Yes. This is Sharon from North Pine Storage. We just wanted to confirm that the unit under your name, Unit 218, will be cleared out by Friday, correct?" "What?" The woman paused. "Your sister, Bree, said you'd be removing everything by the end of the week since the payment lapsed." We don't usually allow third-party conversations like that, but she was very insistent, said it was urgent. Anyway, we just need to confirm. Wait, payment lapsed? I pay that unit through autopay. It shouldn't have lapsed. Well, I'm showing a decline on the last 2 attempts. We sent notices to your listed email address, but haven't gotten a response. I asked her to confirm the email address. It wasn't mine. It was very close to mine. Same first initial, same last name, but 1 letter was off. Like someone had created a near-identical address. And it suddenly clicked. Bree. Bree had somehow accessed the account info, changed the email on file, and let the payments fail, probably hoping it would default, giving her a reason to step in and handle it. That storage unit was important to me, not because of the stuff inside. Although, yes, there were some sentimental things from college, old furniture, boxes of childhood memories, but because it was mine, a space I paid for, maintained, and never asked anyone to help with. I immediately drove there. Luckily, I still had my ID and the access code. The guy at the counter was helpful once I explained what was going on. When I unlocked the unit, I could tell someone had already been there. A few boxes had been opened. Some were half empty. There was a folding chair I didn't recognize and an old suitcase that wasn't mine. They were using my storage unit. I called Bree. No answer. I texted her. Why are you using my storage unit and messing with my email address? No reply. I texted again. You crossed a line. An hour later, she finally wrote back. Wow, you're accusing me of crossing lines? After the way you've treated all of us? Maybe the unit shouldn't be yours anymore if you're just going to keep pushing everyone away. The entitlement in that message didn't just hit me, it burned. I didn't respond. I forwarded everything, screenshots, storage records, emails, to my lawyer. I had one on retainer for work stuff, and I figured it was time to finally use him for personal reasons. That week, I reclaimed the unit, changed the access code, updated the account, and made sure Bree's little stunt was logged. But it didn't stop there. Soon, my parents were involved again. My mom called and left a voicemail that started calm and ended frantic. You know Bree's just trying to keep the family organized. You've been so distant. And now you're threatening her with lawyers? For a storage unit? Eric, this isn't you. This is ugly. I didn't reply. Then came Kevin, who decided to be the muscle of the operation. He showed up at my house, unannounced, 2 days later. I opened the door, saw him standing there in that stupid startup hoodie he always wore, and immediately wished I'd installed a camera. Hey, he said, like we were still on speaking terms. Can we talk? I didn't invite him in. I stepped outside, closed the door behind me, and leaned on the porch railing. Look, he started, I get it. You're upset, but you're making this way bigger than it needs to be. I didn't answer. I just stared at him. He ran a hand through his hair and sighed. We're family, man. You think I wanted to ask for help? You think Bree wanted to get involved with your storage unit? She was just trying to protect your stuff, okay? We thought maybe if you saw we cared enough to step in, you'd come around. My voice was flat. By impersonating my email and taking over my property, he winced. Okay, maybe that was not the best move. But we're desperate, Eric. Dad's account is frozen. Mom's credit cards are maxed out. The business is weeks from folding. We need that 20 grand. You're in a position to help. Why are you doing this? That's when it clicked. They didn't just want the money. They expected it. They saw my refusal not as a choice, but as a betrayal. You think I owe you? I said quietly. You all actually believe I owe you for everything you've put me through. Kevin crossed his arms. We've always been there for you. I almost laughed. No, you've always said you were there. Then laughed behind my back. Mocked my interests. Dismissed my work. You gave me a mug calling me a disappointment, and now you're shocked that I won't bail you out. Kevin's expression hardened. You're being petty. And you're being entitled. I shot back. And I'm done being your safety net. I turned to go back inside, but he grabbed my arm. Eric, don't do this. If the business folds, it's over. For all of us. I looked him dead in the eye. Then maybe it should. I went inside and locked the door. That was the moment things truly broke. Because that was the moment they realized I wasn't bluffing. The next few days were quiet, too quiet. But I could feel it, like something was coming. And I was right. The betrayal, when it hit, wasn't just emotional. It was financial. They didn't just burn the bridge. They tried to collapse the ground under me. And I'll tell you exactly how they did it, because that was the final straw. It started with a letter. A thin, ordinary-looking envelope tucked between junk mail and a coupon booklet addressed to me in shaky handwriting I didn't recognize. No return address. I opened it casually while stirring pasta in the kitchen, expecting maybe a credit card offer or some misplaced HOA warning. But inside was a single sheet of paper and a photocopy of a form with my name on it. Only it wasn't my handwriting. The letter was from a debt collection agency. According to them, I'd co-signed a loan for Langley Family Ventures, LLC, totaling $42,500. My stomach dropped. At first, I thought it had to be a scam. Some phishing attempt. I wasn't stupid. I hadn't signed anything. But the more I looked at the paperwork, the more my hands started to shake. My full name. My old address. My partial social security number. A forged signature that, at a glance, almost looked like mine. I dropped the wooden spoon onto the stove, sauce splattering everywhere, and sat down at the table. I stared at the document like it might disappear if I blinked hard enough. I could feel my chest tightening, not from panic exactly, but from something heavier, something colder, something like betrayal, so deep it made your limbs numb. I called my lawyer immediately. He confirmed what I feared. The paperwork was real. The signature was a near-perfect forgery, likely traced from some older document. The loan had been secured months ago, but the payments hadn't been made in weeks. Now the collectors were circling, and since I was listed as a co-signer, they were coming after me. My family had committed fraud, not just shady manipulation or guilt-tripping or entitlement. Actual, prosecutable fraud. And I knew exactly who was behind it. The name on the loan? Kevin Langley, operating manager. Bree was listed as a partner. Dad was listed as the financial guarantor. But it was my name on the dotted line. That night, I couldn't sleep. I paced the house until 3 a.m., flipping between fury and disbelief. I kept thinking about that stupid mug. World's biggest disappointment. It was almost funny now, how they'd laughed, how they'd written me off, how they'd turned me into a family punchline. And now they'd stolen from me. Lied. Forged. Risked my credit. My reputation. My freedom. And for what? To save a failing lawn care subscription business? To preserve some imaginary image of a perfect family? The next morning, I sat down with my lawyer again. We went over everything. Every record. Every email. Every financial transaction. I authorized him to begin building a case, not just to dispute the debt, but to press charges if needed. I wasn't playing defense anymore. I was done reacting. But that didn't mean I wasn't hurting. For weeks, I felt like I was walking through molasses. My appetite vanished. I'd stare at my laptop for hours, unable to focus on code or client calls. The walls of my house, once a sanctuary, felt too quiet, too empty. I realized I hadn't told a single friend what was going on. I hadn't reached out. I hadn't asked for help. I'd spent so long pretending I didn't need anyone that now, when I actually did, I didn't know how. I hit bottom one afternoon in the middle of May. I was supposed to be onboarding a new client, a pretty big contract that would have boosted my year's revenue by at least 30%. But I couldn't stop checking my phone, refreshing emails, rereading the latest legal updates. I missed the meeting. Just forgot it. Didn't show up. Didn't call. They pulled the contract the next day. That was the lowest I'd ever felt. Not because of the money, but because of what it meant. I'd let them get to me. I'd let their toxicity seep into the one part of my life I'd kept sacred. My work. My independence. My progress. That night, I drove to the beach. It was 3 hours away, but I didn't care. I just needed to move. To breathe different air. I didn't bring a bag. I didn't tell anyone. I just parked the car, walked across the sand, and sat by the water for hours. The ocean didn't care about my problems. It just moved. Constant. Relentless. Unbothered. And sitting there, watching the tide crawl up the shore, I realized something that changed everything. They still controlled me. Not legally. Not financially. Not physically. But emotionally. I'd let them take up space in my head. I'd let their voices echo in my quiet moments. I was still seeking something from them. Validation, apology, closure, that they were never going to give. And that meant they still held power. I drove home with a different mindset. Not to get even. Not to make them understand. But to rebuild. Quietly. Purposefully. Without them. The next morning, I deleted the family group chat. Left every thread. Blocked their numbers. Not out of spite, but because it was necessary. I forwarded all future communication to my lawyer. Then I took a week off work. Not to escape, but to repair. I started with my house. repainted the guest room, reorganized my office, planted herbs on the back patio, small things that made it feel like mine again. I even framed some of my early app wireframes, the ones that started it all. Not for show, just to remind myself that I'd built something. From nothing. Next, I called Jenna, the cousin who had checked in months ago. I told her everything. Not in some dramatic, self-pitying way, but in quiet, honest detail. She listened. Really listened. Then she said, "Eric, I always knew something was off with your family. I just didn't know it was this deep." We talked for hours. About childhood. About work. About boundaries and trauma and guilt. She told me about going no contact with her own father years ago. How hard it was. How freeing it was. That call was a turning point. I started reaching out to others. Friends I'd lost touch with. Old college roommates. Former colleagues I respected. I didn't trauma dump. I just started showing up again. Like I was rejoining the world after a long, confusing hibernation. And they welcomed me. Turns out, people like you more when you stop pretending to be perfect. When you stop hiding your scars. I even joined a local coding collective, something I never would have done before. We met every Thursday at a little co-working space downtown, sharing projects and pizza and long conversations about tech and burnout and the pressure to succeed. It felt good to belong somewhere that wasn't defined by blood or guilt. By the end of summer, I felt different. Not healed, not whole, but stabilized. I disputed the loan and was on track to clear my name. My lawyer said we had enough to open a civil case, maybe even criminal, if I wanted to press forward. But I wasn't sure yet. Part of me still wanted to believe it could be fixed, that they might call, apologize, take responsibility. That dream died in September. I got an email from Kevin. Not an apology, a demand. "I heard you're lawyering up. If you think dragging this into court is going to make you look like the good guy, think again. You're the one who abandoned the family. You're the one who shut the door. We were desperate. You forced our hand. Actions have consequences. So go ahead. Make this ugly. But don't act like you didn't bring it on yourself." That was it. No remorse. No guilt. Just blame. And that's when I decided. This wouldn't end quietly. I would rise. But not just to survive. To make sure they never forgot what they did. And if they thought I'd already hit them with my best move, they hadn't even seen the opening gambit. It's strange how revenge doesn't always start with fire. Sometimes it starts with silence, reflection, space, and then, if you're patient, with a plan. After Kevin's email, everything snapped into place. I finally saw it clearly. I wasn't dealing with a few entitled family members. I was dealing with a system, one that had spent years undermining me, dismissing me, and now, when I refused to play along, trying to erase me. That email wasn't a warning. It was a confession. They thought I wouldn't fight back. They thought I'd fold. They thought I'd stay quiet because that's what I'd always done. They forgot I'd changed. So I did what I do best. I started building. Not code this time. A blueprint. The first thing I did was organize everything. Every text, voicemail, bank statement, email. Every receipt. Every storage unit record. I created folders, color-coded timelines, and a full incident map. My lawyer was stunned. "You sure you don't work in law?" he asked, flipping through the index I'd made. "I work in logic," I told him. "This is just a different language." With everything documented, we began formal proceedings. We filed an affidavit disputing the fraudulent co-signature, sent cease and desist letters to Kevin, Bree, and my parents, and opened a case with the state's attorney general's office for potential fraud and identity theft. It wasn't just a slap on the wrist. If the investigation held up, and it would, they'd be looking at fines. Maybe jail time. But I didn't stop there. While the legal process churned, I started looking deeper into the family business itself. Langley Family Ventures, LLC. A name that sounded vaguely respectable, but didn't actually mean anything. I wanted to know exactly what they were running, who they were running it with, and how exposed they really were. I found a treasure trove of incompetence. The business wasn't just struggling, it was doomed. Kevin had created 3 different shell companies, likely to funnel investments and blur accountability. Bree had listed herself as an unpaid brand consultant, but also authorized several large purchases on a corporate card she wasn't supposed to have. And my dad? He'd co-signed 2 commercial leases with his personal retirement account as collateral. The more I dug, the worse it got. So I made a decision. I was going to buy the land they were renting. It took some maneuvering. They operated out of a low-rent warehouse just outside town, with a landlord who was behind on taxes and looking to cash out. I made a quiet offer through an LLC I'd formed 6 months earlier, a shell company of my own, named something deliberately vague and unrelated. Within 3 weeks, I owned the property. They had no idea. Yet. Meanwhile, I also hired a forensic accountant, one who specialized in uncovering hidden debts and asset mismanagement. We reviewed every dollar that had passed through the business in the past 5 years. It didn't take long to find patterns. Bree had been using the company's account to pay her personal credit cards. Thousands of dollars. Clothes, vacations, dinners, even the down payment on her car. Kevin had written off family vacations as business retreats and reimbursed himself for transport costs with no documentation. I compiled it all, and then I found my opening. Kevin had filed for a government-backed small business grant during the pandemic. On the application, he'd listed me as a silent partner. He even signed a statement saying I had invested $50,000 into the business. That was a federal document. That was fraud. I sat with that discovery for a long time. There was a version of me, the old me, that would have sent him a warning, a last chance message. But I wasn't that person anymore. They hadn't given me warnings. They'd taken what they wanted and assumed I'd either cave or disappear. So I scheduled a meeting instead. Through my lawyer, I invited Kevin, Bree, and my parents to a mediation, a non-legal sit-down to discuss a resolution. They were intrigued. Kevin replied within the hour. Bree took a little longer. My mom, of course, sent a message asking if I was finally ready to forgive and move forward. Forgiveness. They still thought this was about hurt feelings. They didn't realize I was setting the stage. The meeting was held in a neutral office building downtown. I arrived early, dressed sharp, calm, folders in hand. My lawyer sat beside me, quiet but present. I watched as the 4 of them walked in, each with a different expression. Kevin looked smug. Bree wore her practiced PR smile. Dad was tense. Mom looked like she was about to burst into tears, or into a speech. Maybe both. They sat. I said nothing at first, just opened a folder and slid a document across the table. Kevin picked it up, scanned it, then scoffed. What's this supposed to be? A summary, I said. Of everything. What is this, Eric? My mother asked. Some kind of list of grievances? You brought us here for this. No, I said. I brought you here to offer you a choice. I laid out 3 more documents. Copies of the fraudulent loan paperwork, the misused company card transactions, and the federal grant application with my forged signature. Bree blanched. Kevin paled. My dad said nothing. I have enough evidence, I said quietly, to press criminal charges, to freeze your accounts, to report Kevin's grant application for federal fraud. I could destroy the business by Monday morning. Eric, my father said, low and serious, think very carefully about what you're threatening here. I'm not threatening, I replied. I'm offering a settlement. Silence. They waited. I slid another paper across. My terms are simple. You dissolve the LLC within 30 days. You issue a formal public statement, drafted by my attorney, admitting wrongdoing and clearing my name. You repay the full balance of the fraudulent loan, and you never contact me again. Kevin stared at the paper like it might bite him. You've lost your mind. Bree was trembling. You can't be serious. I am, I said. You have 5 business days to sign, or we go to court. I stood, collected my folders, walked out. I didn't look back. By the time I got home, the panic had begun. Kevin had left 3 voicemails. Bree had sent a flurry of texts, ranging from, we didn't know it would go this far, to you're tearing this family apart. My mom emailed me a Word doc titled A Mother's Plea. I didn't open it. Instead, I logged into the portal for the warehouse property I now owned. They were a month late on rent. I clicked the box to begin eviction proceedings. Checkmate was coming, but I wasn't going to just end them. I was going to make sure the world saw who they really were. They didn't sign the settlement. I gave them 5 business days, like I promised. Waited, checked my email every morning at 9 a.m., watched the clock, gave them every second they didn't deserve. But the deadline came and went without a signature. Not even a counteroffer. Nothing. Instead, I got one last group email sent by Kevin, titled, Let's Be Civil. It opened with a paragraph about family values and history we can't erase. Then it pivoted to a thinly veiled threat that if I pushed forward, they'd share their side of the story with the rest of the family, the community, maybe even the press. He mentioned my tech startup lifestyle, Said I'd benefited from family support in ways I might not remember. I read it once, then forwarded it to my lawyer. And that was the last time I ever responded to any of them directly. We filed formal fraud charges the following week: identity theft, wire fraud, and forgery. The evidence we'd gathered was airtight. The paper trail was surgical. The signatures matched one of Kevin's older documents from a business class he'd dropped in college. The fake email address Bree had used was linked to a recovery phone number that led back to her personal cell. And the small business grant Kevin submitted? The IP address matched the one tied to their home Wi-Fi. The state opened a case. It moved faster than I expected. Because it turns out, when you commit fraud using federal funds, people pay attention. But while the legal gears turned, I had one more piece to play. The warehouse. They'd missed 2 months of rent by now. I waited until the 60-day mark passed, then filed the eviction notice. No warning, no reminder, no call. Just a quiet notice taped to the warehouse door one rainy Tuesday morning, delivered by a man wearing a windbreaker and a look of complete indifference. I watched the footage from the security cam I'd installed on the building the week prior. Kevin pulled up around 9:12 a.m., coffee in hand, only to stop mid-step at the front door. He leaned in to read the notice, then snatched it down, pacing in front of the building with his phone glued to his ear. Bree showed up 10 minutes later. She didn't get out of the car. By 10 a.m., a locksmith had arrived. I changed every lock, froze every entry code. Their entire business, their equipment, files, branding materials, was now behind a wall they couldn't legally access. My lawyer handled the next part. They had 14 days to arrange pickup of any business belongings with proof of ownership and a full inventory. Anything unclaimed would be auctioned off, with the proceeds going toward unpaid rent. Kevin emailed me a single sentence through his lawyer. "You're ruining lives over a misunderstanding." I didn't reply, because it wasn't a misunderstanding. It was years of being used, discarded, mocked. It was a birthday mug that was meant as a joke, but spoke volumes. And now? Now I was done being the punchline. The fallout came fast. First, the local paper ran a piece on the business eviction. They didn't name me. I kept my LLC completely anonymous, but they did mention the fraud investigation. Local green business accused of misusing pandemic grant funds. It spread fast. A few local blogs picked it up. Then someone on Facebook shared an old video of Kevin bragging about his eco-entrepreneur hustle and calling himself a family-backed innovator. The comments section was brutal. Then came the subpoenas. The state wanted everything: phone records, tax filings, bank statements. My lawyer forwarded me a copy of the formal complaint. My name was listed as the victim. It felt surreal. A month later, Kevin was arrested. Not in some dramatic, tackled on the sidewalk kind of way, but quietly. Booked. Processed. Charged with 2 counts of fraud and 1 count of identity theft. He was released on bond, but the case was already making waves. Bree was named as a co-conspirator, though she wasn't arrested yet. My father's role in co-signing false financials triggered an IRS audit. And my mom? She called me from an unknown number. I let it go to voicemail. She didn't cry. She didn't yell. She didn't apologize. She just said, "You didn't have to destroy us." And that's when I realized something. They still didn't get it. They still thought I'd done this to them. They didn't understand that they had done this to themselves, and I had simply stopped shielding them from the consequences. I didn't need their apology anymore. I'd already given it to myself. Over the next 6 months, my life changed more than I ever expected. With the legal proceedings underway and the public fallout behind me, I finally had space to breathe, to build again. I started a new project, a platform for whistleblowers in small business spaces. It wasn't a revenge site. It was a safe, secure tool to help people navigate toxic family-run businesses, fraud reporting, and legal protections. I partnered with a few nonprofit organizations. Even got invited to speak on a podcast about navigating financial abuse. The irony wasn't lost on me. The kid who once quietly left birthday parties with his hands full of dirty plates and his mouth full of apologies, now building systems to help others escape the same trap. And I didn't do it out of spite. I did it because there are so many Erics out there. So many people who stay silent because it's easier. Because they're scared. Because the people hurting them are the same ones who once tucked them into bed at night. But the truth? Family isn't a reason to stay silent. Family isn't a shield against accountability. And most importantly, family isn't ownership. I reclaimed my name. My time. My peace. And as for that stupid mug, I still have it. It sits on a shelf in my office, behind a pane of glass. Not as a reminder of pain, but as a trophy, because I was the disappointment who finally said no, who finally drew a line, and who made sure they could never cross it again.